And good morning, everyone. We are live on YouTube, but we are going to bring in our Facebook communities. We've got Atlanta Falcons fans on All Falcons, and we've got Scott Kennedy Sports both on Facebook. So hang tight while we bring those in. We're going to talk some NFL draft today. And welcome in, everybody. This is Coast to Coast Football. It will be coast to coast because I'm in Atlanta. My co-host Nick Kendell is in Seattle, so we give him just a minute to make his coffee. He'll be joining us shortly. But what we want to talk about today is Dane Brugler's of The Athletic, his second, mock draft. He went through 2 rounds. We won't hit all the rounds, of course, but we want to hit some of the big storylines, including the big trades, some of the surprises, some of the things that we've said before that we agree with, don't agree with, some interesting perspective. Some of the more intriguing teams, that type of stuff. And it's Wednesday, so we'll go at least an hour today. I think we went almost 80 minutes last Wednesday, for goodness sakes, just going through the top 10 and having some fun doing it. So I want to say welcome in to everybody. Hit that subscribe, like, and share as you come in. It helps us reach out to more people on the internet and find more draftniks and fans just like you. So speak of the devil and he shall appear. Just hitting his lights. I want to say good morning to Nick Kendell. Like I said, he's in Seattle. I'm in Atlanta, so we are coast to coast football this morning. And Nick, how are you this morning?
I am doing well. It's 6 a.m. I woke up a little bit later today, and we sleep upstairs, and it gets so hot up there. So when I come downstairs, it is freezing. We have the house set to like 61 at night, and I tried to kick it for a little bit, but because of where the heater is, right behind me here, it's off. So I'm bundled up. I got my blanket on. I'm cold. It's a cold, rainy morning in Seattle, but hopefully this warm coffee from Lion Coffee Company will warm me up here. I'm getting excited. Also heading to Hawaii in less than a month, and Patrick's going to hook me up with seeing a roastery there or whatever on the Kona side. So
Very cool.
Excited. Yeah, really excited.
Yeah, they took when I went out to California, they took me on the wine tour. I'm an alcoholic. You want to talk about miserable? Let's celebrate drinking wine. By the end of the day, I was like just exhausted. I'm just laying down on a bench, just mentally completely beaten down. Let's celebrate this as all those voices in your head are screaming at you now. Drinking coffee, yeah, we can do that one for sure. So that one wasn't so much fun. Oh, what a great day. Let's go see a winery. Yeah, sure. Let's go hit the crack den afterwards. On that note, Dane Brugler to me is one of the newer names in the draft. Excuse me. You know, you go back to the old heads of like Mel Kiper, who's been doing it forever. I think Dane Brugler, he's probably been doing it a decade at least, but to me that makes him the new guy. You've kind of been singing his praises to me since you and I started working the other 2 hours, and I agree with you that there isn't anybody out there that puts in more work than this guy. The work that he does for The Athletic. Now, is it perfect? No. If you are in the business of prognosticating and making predictions, you're gonna miss. The only way to not ever miss is to not put yourself out there and guess. So if you're putting forth the work and you can back it up, you've got my respect. Dane Brugler's got my respect for sure. Not that it matters much to him.
Yeah, Dane, good guy as well, which goes a long way in my book. Always, open book, and he'll tell you what he can and talk with him. We talk a few bit of Iowa Hawkeye prospects. I got wind that my guy at Iowa, Lucas Van Ness, was declaring, so I gave him a heads up because he's been on the Lucas Van Ness train since November. Like, hey, I'm like, heads up, it's coming around the corner here. We got Lucas Van Ness going to declare. He's like, okay, I'll keep an ear out for it. Thanks for the heads up. So good guy, Dane, and appreciate him over the Athletic. And I wrote an article about the Broncos pick. That'll be released sometime today by boss man Chad. And he puts in this piece that's called The Beast. And it's, I kid you not, this sounds like hyperbole, but it's like 1,000 prospects that he goes through. And he doesn't write about he gets let's say 30 players in a position down, and then he'll list about another 20 after that with their specs without the background report. But you find out about the kids hobbies and whatnot, and their grade point average. I mean, I don't understand how he can compile the information he does, but he does great work. Again, it's a mock draft too. I'm not going to agree with every single pick, but he's great. He was one of the first people last year on Travon Walker being super high, on the offensive lineman that went to the Panthers whose name's escaping me right now, the first offensive lineman
They
taken.
had Icky. Didn't they take Icky? Ekwonu?
Ekwonu, yes. Yep,
Mhm.
Ike Ekwonu. So he's great. He's connected, but he also does his own work. So
Yeah.
shout out to him. I think I first discovered him doing a radio segment I found online, like with Lance Zierlein, who's done
Mhm.
NFL.com profiles for a while and son of a former
Yeah,
offensive
speaking
line
of
coach.
Lance, we're gonna bring up Lance Zierlein today when we go through this draft as well,
Okay.
because he had some interesting things to say about the Colts and the quarterback position.
Yep. So shout out to Dane. I was not I didn't, totally I'd be like, oh, this is the best mock ever. Everything that Dane says is great because I didn't love the Broncos pick. But that's okay. It's a mock draft in January. So it is what it is. Broncos aren't even had their pick because they're going to trade for Sean Payton. Right. That's the
Yeah,
world we're
no,
living
like I said, put in the work, and it makes sense. Now that this is opened up, guys, we're live. If you're listening to us after the fact, the podcast is starting to take off on Apple Pods and Spreaker and all of those places. You can find those right now. We're going to rebrand this one, so I think this one's going to end up being Coast to Coast Football podcast. So we'll have an announcement on that. But right now, you can find all these podcasts that we've done at FalconsPodcast.com. And if you're listening after the fact, we do this live every Monday morning and every Wednesday morning because we enjoy the interaction with fans like Joe Cannon. So we want to say good morning to some folks that are in here live with us this morning. Joe Cannon says, great morning, Scott Nick. Good morning to you as well. Luke comes and he says, for the life of me, I do not understand the draft. Looking forward to learning a thing or two. It's Luke, I'm not sure where you're from or what your sport is, but if you were to try and explain this to someone who followed international football for a living, that's kind of what they did. They'd be like, wait, what? You just pick guys and you tell them where to go? That's weird.
Yeah.
That's very socialist. Yeah, it is. The whole thing of it, rewarding teams to lose, all that kind of stuff. It's strange. And then the players, the evaluations, the positional values, all that type of thing. We can get into that, and feel free to ask questions. We enjoy this kind of stuff. Mark Schrader coming in with the thumbs up and also with the support. Mark, appreciate you coming in with a super chat, coming in yellow. I like to say that, it helps, keeps my forehead nice and shiny and keeps the lights on around here. So, your support is, like I said, is one of the reasons, a big reason that we're in here doing this. Now, wherever you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, you can give super chats like Mark just did, or Facebook stars. A great way to support Nick and I and help support the cause. Falling Sloth says, good morning, Nick and Scott. Excited to learn about these draft prospects. Me too. It's, for the most part, it's I'm coming in a kind of a blank slate, and then I build my knowledge base through the next couple of months. And I don't pen myself a draft expert. I think I'm a pretty good talent evaluator, but to be an expert, I would have to have been doing this for the past year. I'm not there yet, not anywhere close. So I don't call myself a draft expert, but I'm a pretty good scout. And my scouting really starts beginning they say the draft starts in Mobile. I'll be down there for 3 days, and I'll film everything, and I'll watch everything 10 times as I'm cutting up highlights on this channel, and I'll have a pretty good idea of those guys for sure, and then learn a lot from doing these shows with Nick too as well. So Brad D coming in says, good morning all. Michael Ranquillo joining us. Jeremy says it's snowing here in Denver. Why wouldn't it? Dominic Jaramillo coming in says, good morning, Nick and Scott and Dog Nation. And Roderick says it's snowing in Somerset, England too. Yeah, and it says it stops because it doesn't really get that cold there. And Triple Eight Dr. Pepper joining us again. Welcome back. He says the guys over at PFF compared the last 6 drafts yesterday, and their top guy, Mike Renner, said this is a fairly weak draft. He ranked it the second weakest of the last 6. Well, we'll see. We'll see. They said that, and one last one real quick was good morning, everyone, was Chris Walker. So good morning, joining us on Facebook. And Luke, yeah, I had a feeling Luke was an international football fan.
Yeah.
It's been taken over, but if the NFL is a socialist model, international soccer is pure cutthroat capitalist, and he says it's been corrupted by oil money. So,
Yeah. And real quick, I want to get to 888 Dr. Pepper's comment here from Mike Renner. Also does good work at PFF. Appreciate what he does as well over there. But weakest draft, it's still, I think, a little bit early to say that definitively. But that's watching the talent from the guys that I've watched so far that are considered the top prospect. I think this year has more, no doubt, blue chip talent at the top. But the guys that are going to go from 5 to 20, I think is probably a lower tier than last season and the last few seasons as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see due to that. And I don't think I'm alone in sharing that opinion. I think you're going to see the Bears really not be that super interested to trade out of the top 3 or 4 unless they get an absolute unbelievable package from a team, because I think the drop off after Jalen Carter and Will Anderson is unbelievably substantial in this class. And also, I believe because of that, you're going to see quarterbacks go off the board early. Not because these quarterbacks aren't flawed. It's not the Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, I guess Zach Wilson would have missed on that, but a great, talented prospect. I guess not great, but a talented prospect. You're going to see quarterbacks go off early. And I think it's more of an indictment on the talent surrounding those quarterbacks at the top than it is the talent available. You don't have a Patrick Surtain in this class. You do have a couple elite defensive linemen, but there's not an offensive tackle that is a no-doubter. There's not a wide receiver that's a no-doubter. All those kind of positions, I think you are missing in this class the depth of the defensive line edge. There are some good ones, but I think in a lot of classes you'd have Miles Murphy and Brian Brisset, more in that early first half of the pick 8 through 16 versus being talked about in that 5 to 10 range. So will be interesting. It's early. We're going to get the measurements of these guys, but from what I've watched, it is not the most dynamic class I've ever seen. Where I really do like it, tight ends. I think this is one of the best tight end classes we've had, honestly, since I can remember. It's a really deep, talented tight end class. You don't have a Kyle Pitts in here. You don't have a Brock Bowers, but you're going to get quality tight ends all the way through the 4th round, maybe even that 5th round, given the positional value. And I think the defensive backs are very deep as well. So those are 2 spots right now, just from viewing. I'm like, oh man, where does this guy projected to go? 4th? That looks like a middle of the 3rd round, early 3rd round kind of guy to me. So spots to watch out for.
Right. And we always talk about being a label. When I was doing it at Scout, we had stars. We didn't have a secondary rating system where a 5-star was like a 9.8 or anything. It was just a star. That was it. So we created it where the top 50 prospects in the country were a label. They were 5 stars. That's it. Like, well, what's that mean? It means they're top 50 in the country. To me, it was a label like a 1st-round draft pick. Not all 1st-round draft picks are created equally. No. But once you get drafted in the 1st round, by God, you've got that label of a 1st-round draft pick. You've got a top 5 pick. But they are not all created equally. Now, you mentioned the drop-off after Jalen Carter and Will Anderson. I think you'd agree that part of that is because of how good of prospects those 2 are. I know last year you were talking that if Will Anderson and Jalen Carter were available, they might be the number 1 and 2 picks overall.
Yep. Yeah, I think they're extremely talented. They are actual blue chippers. Last year, I'm not sure that I could say there was a definitive blue chipper in the class. Maybe Ike Ekwonu, given the position and whatnot, but because you hardly ever see offensive tackles go 1 overall. Typically they're, 10 to 16 range for those elite guys, maybe 8 to 16, depending on the draft class. But it's a solid class overall. There's going to be some depth. There's going to be good players. I just don't know after the quarterbacks and those 2 defensive linemen where this class goes. You're still going to have good players available as just a little bit of no man's land in, unfortunately, where the Falcons pick. Unfortunately, I guess not unfortunately, but I guess the Seahawks are like right at that cutoff because of the quarterbacks versus the 2 elite prospects in this class. And the other one here, I have 3 blue chippers in this class, personally speaking, and one of them is a running back in Bijan Robinson. I know that that's going to be a little bit controversial where he's going to go and whatnot. This will be fun to follow. I know that Dane, not to spoil anything, had him going 31 overall, the last pick in the 1st round of the Eagles. I love Dane. I would be floored if Bijan Robinson falls out of the top 25.
We kicked the tires on the Eagles taking them with their first round pick.
Yeah.
I'm like, where does he fit? I mean,
yeah,
they're, when you've got a team, the Eagles are such a luxury on that, that they could take the best player available at running back.
Well, Brenner also said that Bijan's a blue chipper as well, and pretty much said what I just said. Well, I'm very much a believer in the positional value stuff and the scouting the traits and whatnot. So I could see why Renner and I have the same opinion. I know that some people really like Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, and Renner's a big Notre Dame fan, if I'm not incorrect, but I don't see the traits there he's a very high floor prospect, but not elite. And you have a lot of tools with Brian Brisset and Miles Murphy, but I just don't see it. Like last year, Trevon Walker, an incredible athlete, the height, weight, tools, whatnot. I wouldn't call him blue chip because the tape wasn't enough to call him blue chip. That's kind of where I'm at with Miles Murphy. And
the last 2 drafts that we've done together, Nick, the 2021 draft was really good at the top. That one went 12 deep with guys that were either you're getting your quarterback of the future, in theory, there's never a sure thing, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, but you've got that guy and you're like, okay, we're going after a quarterback. that should be in this range. Or you were going to get a really exciting prospect, and you could go 12, 13, 14 deep, and most of those guys hit. I mean, almost every single one of those guys has been a hit, from Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts is in there,
J.C. Horn, Devonta Smith,
it was
Rashawn
a
Slater.
really fun draft. Pat Surtain, it was a really fun draft. Last year, I said all along, and watching the guys contribute early, that this draft, the 2022 draft, was deep from 30 to 120. The second, third, fourth round, there was a lot, especially in the trenches. So we'll see how this shakes out. Last year I heard that all year. Oh, it's a weak draft. It's a weak draft. It's a weak draft. It's weak at the top. It was weak at the top. It ended up being a really good draft last year. But let's get this thing started with the number one pick. Nick, Dane wasn't the first one to say that the Colts are going to trade up. What he did do that PFF did not do was he put in the compensation that was there. So he's got the Colts trading with the Bears, swapping 1 and 4, and then the Bears get their second round pick. So that's number 35, and a 2024 first round pick. So 2 firsts and a second to move up, and they have him taking Bryce Young from Alabama.
I think it's certainly Bryce Young should go number 1 overall in this draft class, given the quarterback position. I don't know if it's going to be a slam dunk, though, that a team that the Bears want to trade with is going to want to come up for Bryce Young, because we don't know what the parameters of how the Colts or the Seahawks or the Panthers, et cetera, are going to value these quarterbacks. Bryce Young, for as calm, collected, magnificent he is, smooth, getting the ball out, throwing off different angles, is going to be a massive outlier in terms of his size. He's listed at 5'11", 6 foot, 190 pounds. We'll see what he actually comes in at. I'm guessing he's going to pack on the weight for the combine and then not do any of the running. And then you'll see him slim down and then run at the pro day or something like that. Just a classic, I'm a small man, but don't tell me I'm small situation in that one. But he's going to be an outlier, I think. And Mock Draftable, which does a phenomenal job aggregating combine data. I think when I added up all the quarterbacks, or they have an aggregate of all the quarterbacks at the combine since 1999, there have been, I think, 700 quarterbacks weighed. Only 3 of them weighed under 195 pounds. 3 out of 720 or something, which is a significant sample size.
That's a big number. I would say that the game has changed enough over even the past 5 years with the quarterback protection that I'm not as worried about it, where I want the guy who can make quick decisions and make the throws. But again, you're still not talking about, when you're looking in the top 10, you're looking for traits. And I think that's where you can really miss on quarterbacks sometimes. Zach Wilson, and, I don't mean to bag on him again, but, Zach Wilson's bigger, stronger arm. He's nowhere near the quarterback Bryce Young is. I mean, it's not even close. But Zach Wilson goes second overall. That said, I mentioned Lance Zierlein. There's an article on Horseshoe Huddle, the Fan Nation site on Sports Illustrated, that Zierlein said that the one player they probably wouldn't take is Bryce Young, because Chris Ballard doesn't want small players. I think CJ Stroud has played his way into number 1 contention, and then Brugler has Will Levis going number 2 overall. So I agree with you. I think that it's not a slam dunk that it's going to be Bryce Young. And what's interesting about Levis is, he acknowledges that this year was a little bit of a disappointment for him. And he kind of helps throw Rich Scangarillo under the bus. Had a new play caller, new offensive coordinator who was fired at the end of the year. So that may be an excuse. It may be reasoning, but he's got the tools. I'm on the CJ Stroud train, man. That might be, if I'm not going Bryce Young, I'm probably going CJ Stroud number 1.
Yeah, I think you're correct. I was really impressed with Will Levis in the bowl game 2 seasons ago when they took on Iowa, showing the arm talent. And Kentucky was really devoid of talent at the offensive line and pass catcher this season compared to the 2021 season. So I am willing to give him a little bit of slack. The tools are there. I'm a little bit worried he's more turnover prone. But I think he's a fine quarterback prospect. I would agree with you, CJ Stroud over him, but I think Levis is a fine quarterback prospect. Also, I'm super intrigued by Anthony Richardson, who's probably one of the most toolsy quarterbacks
He goes
out
pretty
there.
high too.
Yeah. I mean,
it won't take us long to get to him.
no. So I think it's a solid quarterback class at the top. But because of NIL, the depth of this quarterback class is atrocious. After those first four, it falls off. It falls off a cliff. I'm actually a little bit worried for the practices out there at the Senior Bowl for you, given the quarterback talent that's going to be available.
It's tough. I think Max Dugan is going to be out there from TCU. I just saw.
Yeah.
We'll see how he can do. It was good last year. Some good throwers last year, but we'll see. I like watching the trenches. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where they get to go one-on-ones and and close quarter combat. I do like watching the trenches, and I do think that's where you can get really good value out of the Senior Bowl is in there, because the older guys, skill players are born, linemen are built. It takes a little bit longer for the linemen to really mature. It's a grown man's game in the trenches where
Yeah.
a 17-year-old could still be running 4.3s and have, quick twitch and catch a ball. But
that's why all these cornerbacks and wide receivers are from these blue blood programs, and you got offensive linemen from Wisconsin Whitewater and North Dakota State.
That's right.
And
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I've said that a long time, that skill players are born and linemen are built. Let's hit on the in the chat again real quick. Dom comes in. He says, question, guys, is it possible for the Broncos to get a left tackle in the draft or any kind of offensive lineman? Sure it is. There's going to be guys there. Will you have your pick at the end of the first round, though?
I mean, if you're taking, I have a hard time with this question because you have to answer another question before you get there. What's going to happen with Garrett Bowles? What is your long-term plan with Garrett Bowles? And if you are keeping him, then you need to find a tackle who is versatile that can either play guard early on or right tackle. And then you have to ask yourself that question. You have to bring in these offensive linemen and see them run the drills on both sides, because some of these offensive linemen you haven't seen play both sides of the line of scrimmage. A guy who makes sense for the late first round for left tackle teams is Anton Harrison, offensive tackle from Oklahoma. I think Dane has him going in the middle of the second round. Inconsistent with his hands, inconsistent with his just overall technique. I don't think he's the most powerful as well, displacing guys at the point of attack, but he's long, he's smooth. He passes the eye test, definitely has the skills to be a pass protector in the NFL from a physical standpoint. But can he play right tackle? I don't know. It's not as easy as, flipping him over in Madden. The tape's not there for that. So you could find a left tackle. I don't think the depth of the offensive tackle class, specifically ones that you're going to keep at tackle, is great after the first 3 picks. I think there's probably only 3 offensive linemen in this class I'd feel comfortable taking in the first round. After that, a lot of day 2 talent that might be better at guard than tackle.
So we'll see. Again, I think it's easier to contribute early inside, just because you've got some help in there. And also, you're going against strength on strength. And yeah, you've got big, strong guys in front of you, but you don't have the variety of players that you have to go against when you're at tackle. You're not having a 240-pound edge rusher, and then, Cam Jordan coming in at 300 pounds who's going to lift you through the sky. Those are the kind of guys you have to deal with when you're at tackle, is the different types there. Big Al comes in. He says, I'm late. Well, welcome in, Big Al. Appreciate you being here. Keith Robbins has joined us too. And Big Al says, what if the Falcons, maybe means what if the Falcons take Jordan Addison? And then we'll get back into, we talked about the Texans. Then we'll move on to number 3 in the Cardinals after this. But what if the Falcons take Jordan Addison? What are your thoughts on that pick? Wide receiver out of USC.
I think he's a solid wide receiver, a wide receiver 2 in this class. Really good at getting separation. I think he's your Calvin Ridley kind of mold. Wouldn't say dynamic athlete in any sort of way, but if you get open, then you don't have to be, the height, weight, speed freak guy. We've seen that over the last few seasons. However, with how the Falcons are building this team, I think they're looking for height, weight, speed. They're trying to build a basketball team out there that can beat the absolute hell out of these players. And one of the reasons the Falcons have been so good in the run game is because when the run does get out to the perimeter, those wide receivers are burying people. The tight ends are out there occupying cornerbacks and safeties. So I don't know about Addison. If you trade down into the 15 to 24 range and he's there, that's fine. You think he's going to go higher?
Keep going.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's this class though. I think that's about where he's gonna. That's where I would evaluate him. I don't think he's the top 10 type of wide receiver. I think he's a very good wide receiver 2 kind of guy. But that's just where I personally see him. All these wide receivers have flaws. You wish that there was a Marvin Harrison Jr. in this class, but we'll see. The other one here, that first round talent, but gonna have to do the background check on, is Keyshawn Butte from LSU, who got kicked out of the program for a sex scandal party thing that they had before the SEC championship game. Bunch of players that one, we're going to hear more about that as I think time comes out. Maybe we'll wait for Dane Brugler's Beast to read what he has to say in that, because I don't want to, point fingers, but there's some weird stuff going on with LSU in that one. But Jordan Addison, former Blitnikoff winner, transferred from Pitt to USC. Fine player. Did really well last year. Blitnikoff is the wide receiver award, correct?
Yeah. I didn't know you won that, especially last year when all those wide receivers were around.
He had NFL quarterback throwing him the ball on Kenny Pickett, which made a big difference for him at Pitt. But very good. I just don't think he's, no doubt wide receiver 1. I don't think he's super duper dynamic, but he's a good wide receiver 2 guy, and he'll go probably middle back end of the first round.
Big Al, I'm going to answer this quicker. Too high for me at 8. That's basically what Nick said. Watching him makes me want Caleb Williams, not Jordan Addison.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it is. It's like I'm watching this wide receiver and I'm like, oh man, I want that quarterback. The wide receiver was fine. He was okay. Should be a solid pro. Mm-hmm. Too high for me at 8. I'd look in a different direction. Back end of the first, maybe, depending on how he tests. Nothing showed to me the traits of a first round guy when I was watching him. Again, you want something that really stands out, whether it's size, speed, quickness, separation, all those things. He was good, but nothing was great, which doesn't scream first round and certainly doesn't scream top 10 for me. Moving on to the Arizona Cardinals, they're sitting in a good spot here at number 3, especially if the 2 teams ahead of them go quarterback. They get to choose either Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. And in this case, they went edge. And I think we've kind of done the same thing a lot of the times, Nick. And they went with Will Anderson with the number 3 overall pick. I think they would love, and they're in a really good spot to get one of those 2 guys right there.
Yeah, 100%. I probably would go Will Anderson, because Ty should go to the more valuable position, which is edge. No doubt, just where they're aligned on the field, they're going to be able to make more impact plays. People kind of get a little bit clouded by what Aaron Donald did. Aaron Donald is a unicorn among unicorns for what he did at that position. So Jalen Carter, great player. If they took him, I wouldn't fault them. But I think Will Anderson's probably the way I would go as well. A little bit raw in his technique right now. Pretty much has just been winning based on his explosiveness and bend. A little bit lighter as well. Not one of these behemoth type of edge rushers, but so explosive. His play in 2021 was better than 2022 from an output perspective, but teams were doing everything they possibly could to take out Will Anderson from a game plan perspective. Double teams, chipping, rolling away from him, sliding protection towards him, or sliding the pocket away from him. He's a great player, great athlete. I think because of his lack of technical refinement in his pass rush moves, I'm guessing early on, it's not going to come together for him. But I'm thinking year 2, year 3, once things start to come together from a skills perspective, then he could explode and be a perennial 10 sack a year kind of guy with leading top 10 in the league in pressures.
Yeah, he's 235 right now. Wouldn't surprise me a bit to see him play in the Von Miller range of 250. He'll put on the weight in his hips, thighs, legs, all that extra weight you put on his lower body. He'll play at 250, and he's 6'4", so he's got a frame to put it on. So I think that's a real good pick, and I'd be really happy. So Arizona Cardinals take Will Anderson. The Chicago Bears moved down to 4 and picked up another first-round pick and another second-round pick out of it, and they do exactly what I said they should do in Dane's mock draft, which is trade down until you have either Will Anderson or Jalen Carter available. Once you only have one of them available, that's where you want to be picking, because you don't want to lose them. Again, unless somebody comes and offers you 4 first-round picks or something ridiculous.
Yeah,
you don't want to lose one of those guys. You want to get your mark there, and they get to 4. They get another first, another second, and they get Jalen Carter. Hallelujah, Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I mean, what a win for them. I know this team needs a lot of offensive help, but their defense, I know how much I love the EPA per play and looking at the outputs on that. The graph had to expand so far to fit the Bears defense in the second half of the season. They were atrocious. I mean, they made Mike White look like freaking Tom Brady out there and another third string quarterback as well. I mean, this horrible defense. They need help after trading Roquan Smith, after trading Robert Quinn, and they're going to have avenues besides the first pick to improve and help around Justin Fields. I mean, they have like twice the cap space as any other team in football or something this offseason. I mean, it's insane. So getting a blue chip player in this class, trading down and still getting one of the top two in this class is a great get for the Bears. The thing that's going to be interesting here is we're going to see this Colts Bears trade mocked, I think, continuously. What if the Colts like Will Levis at quarterback 1 and they feel like they don't need to trade up to 1 to get him?
Maybe they do. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
To me, there's not a consensus at number 1. And you want to be talking up all 3 of these guys. If you're sitting in the 1 and 2 spot, it makes those picks more valuable.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to hear that a consensus has been formed. For me, it'd be Young or Stroud. And I could go either way on that. I really could. I wouldn't mind sitting at number 2. Then I don't have to make a decision.
Yeah.
The decision's been, unless they take Will Levis number 1, I'm like, damn. Yep. I have trouble seeing Levis going that high, but you never know. Again,
there's a lot of talk about it.
You've seen quarterbacks with tools get reached for throughout the eternity of the history of this draft. I love where the Bears are sitting on this. I do. Coming out of Jalen Carter, you build right in the middle of your defense. And if anybody knows about the strength of the middle of the defense, it's the Chicago Bears. Even though, they're more typically known for middle linebackers and inside linebackers, you're still talking about building the spine of your defense. Defensive tackle, nose guard, inside linebacker, safety. And you got a piece right there in the middle that should be elite. Elite. Oh, and by the way, you got a second and first also. My goodness. Oh, I mean, and I got $100-something million. And, people say, but the Bears are terrible. I'm like, well, if you've got $100+ million in salary cap, you don't have talent.
Yeah.
Of course, they're set up to rebuild. And this is a piece that will help them. They think they got their quarterback. I agree with them. I'd still go with Justin Fields. Now you've got these building pieces and money to go and move forward. Whew, it's going to be fun if they do it right and they get it right. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch the ascendancy of the Chicago Bears for the Bears fans.
Yeah, they got to be kicking themselves for trading for Chase Claypool, which ends up being the 32nd overall pick. Granted, I think they make that pick because they're not super enthused by the wide receiver draft class, but. We'll see how it plays out. And the one final thing I'll talk about the Bears here, their scheme, they really do want a 3-tech that can cause a lot of havoc, in Matt Eberflus's defense. They tried to sign Larry Ogunjobi, I think, a few times this offseason and kept failing physicals. So they were looking to spend some money on a 3-technique type. Just didn't work out for them. So Jalen Carter, he's not just a 3-technique. He can play across the line, 5-4-I 3. But getting that type of interior pass rusher would be great for them. I mean, you're talking about, again, Matt Eberflus's defense. That's a team that traded for DeForest Buckner, traded a mid-first round pick with that Colts to bring in DeForest Buckner to get what they needed there in that defense. So it's a very valuable position in that scheme. And Jalen Carter, I mean, not only fits the scheme, but the talent position as well.
I think he fits any scheme. I honestly think you can move him out to end, at minimum in a 3-4, but depending on how you wanted to, a strong side end and just lock down 2 guys, you could play him at a defensive end in a 4-3. He's that athletic. Yeah. He's the guy.
He looks like Chris Jones. I think he's a Chris Jones clone.
The more I talk about him, the more I think, I'd rather have him than Will Anderson. It's going to be a good debate, and I think the Cardinals that are in the Bears are in a good spot if they get to choose between those guys. But the Bears come out of this thing smelling like roses. Mm-hmm. Before we move to the Panthers at 5, yes, I did say the Panthers at 5. Jamal comes in. He says, "Good morning, Scott and Nick and everyone in the chat." That's all y'all. Good morning, Jamal. Question, Nick, how come every time the Falcons try to interview one of the Broncos coaches, the Broncos always block them from interviewing?
I don't know about the ones in the past, but as far as Jure Evero, the Broncos are interested in keeping him, no doubt. I don't think you can trade compensation for a coordinator, so that changes things a tad, but the Broncos are interested in keeping him. And also the other thing here is maybe a negative effect of this new compensatory process, but if you hold on to a a coach for 2 years, a minority coach for 2 years, and then they leave for a new opportunity, you get compensatory selections back. Like we just saw the 49ers player, pro personnel director in the front office, minority candidate, go to Tennessee to now be their GM. 49ers are going to get comp picks back for that. And those are valuable to get. Evero's only been in Denver for 1 year. Probably want to keep him. Also, I think they want to give whoever's hired as the head coach a chance to say yay or nay on Evero as well. So we'll see I guess I was going to say, if you're that interested in him and interviewing for a head coach and maybe he becomes available for a defensive coordinator, like we've seen, I think he's interviewed for every single head coaching opening this cycle.
In Jamal, it's a lateral move, so they can block him. So if they wanted to interview him, if they had a head coaching opening, they couldn't block him. They could bring him in for a head coach. Now, reading ESPN Insider this morning, Jeremy Fowler and Don Graziano, they pointed out the Saints can't block their guys because they're co-defensive coordinators and they don't call the plays. So they're a defensive coordinator position would be seen as a promotion. So they can't block their guys. The Panthers, they're not blocking theirs because they're not sure what they're going to do. So they're a little more open about it as far as with their defensive coordinator.
They must have changed the rules.
Is a red hot candidate right now. And the Broncos are saying, if you're not interviewing for a head coach where we can't stop him, then you're not interviewing at all. Moving on to number 5 in Dane Brugler's of the Athletics mock draft. This to me is one of the more interesting selections that he makes, Nick. He's got the Carolina Panthers trading up to number 5 from 9 with the Seattle Seahawks to get the former Denver Broncos pick. Yeah, that's a mouthful. And taking quarterback CJ Stroud. I think, and to give it up, they give up their 9th pick, obviously. So the Seahawks move from 5 to 9. And then they give up their 93. So that'd be a third rounder, I guess. Third round pick, late third round pick. And then a 2024 first round pick. That's a lot to move up. However, if you're getting CJ Stroud out of it, I think that's a decent move. That'd be fairly similar to what the Giants got from the Bears for Justin Fields. Somewhere, fairly close in there. Justin ended up going a little bit later, but it was a first round, swapping places, and next year's first. So it's similar. So not too much to pay for the right quarterback. I think this is a move the Panthers should make if it's available. The question is, should the Seahawks make this move? That's where I start coming in question. When we did this a couple weeks ago before the playoff game, we were pretty much said, I'd roll one more year with Geno. Now, I'm not so sure the Seahawks are that comfortable doing that. And if they've got CJ Stroud looking them in the face at 5, I don't know that they're trading out of that spot, Nick.
They're going to put in the evaluation on these guys and have to weigh the value of selecting that quarterback versus the value of trading for a guy or trading back. So it's definitely going to be an interesting process with the Seahawks. I think they would love to have Geno Smith back. If not, they could bring a guy in. The thing that makes this complicated is an ideal situation. They signed Geno Smith to a 2-year contract and they still draft the quarterback. Is Geno Smith going to be interested at all in signing that 2-year contract? And then knowing that probably means they are very much in the quarterback market. I don't know. Maybe this is a team that's looking to bring in a Jacoby Brissett for a 2-year contract and then drafting a quarterback as well. But I think, Seahawks are in a good spot overall. This is a team that overachieved this season record-wise. You could see the talent disparity, especially on that defense versus the 49ers out there. That 7 seed definitely watered down the talent level in the playoffs in this 2-7 matchup. But they're going to have to – it's going to be a very interesting conversation. Right now, if I was in the Seahawks position, I'd probably take the quarterback here. I don't know if you're going to be picking in the top 5 again. Don't know if the quarterback – the depth of the top of the class is going to be as good next season. I think right now you have 2 quarterbacks that are no doubt, kind of guys as no doubt as you possibly can be trying to predict the future. But after that, Quinn Ewers, JJ McCarthy, question marks with those guys, very young, talented, but maybe not coming together totally just yet. So I would take the quarterback. I'd probably take CJ Stroud unless I was blown away.
I probably would too. Unless, the Seahawks have their own. No, I don't think they'd have a shot at Anthony Richardson unless they ended up pairing a couple together. Well, if they went back to 9, they probably would. So, maybe you go back to 9 and take Anthony Richardson. For the record, I'd be real hard pressed if I'm the Seattle Seahawks to trade out of that 5 spot if CJ Stroud's on the board. Really hard pressed to do it. Number 6, let's hit the chat again real quick. I like to do that every so often. Kevin Mapp coming in. If we didn't say good morning, want to make sure we say good morning to our Southern Miss Golden Eagle. Good morning. How are you? And Greg has a question as we get to 8. Let's sit on this when we get to 8. Well, we can address it now, actually. Can the Falcons trade down to 12 and still get Tyree Wilson? Will he even be there at 8? That's a risk. My guess is he will be there at 8, especially if these quarterbacks are going. You have 3 quarterbacks going in the top 5. You got a pretty good chance at Tyree Wilson. At 12, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough depending on the measurables and all that type of things. We've seen guys that we were talking about in the top 10. We were mocking around this time George Karlaftis being available to the Falcons at 8, and he lasted to the back end of the first. Probably should have gone much higher. I think the original evaluation was probably pretty good. He had a good season for the Chiefs this year. So it's tough to tell right now. I would say that would be a tough pull if things were to be right now, but they're not. The pro days, combines, interviews, background searches, all that stuff hasn't really started hitting yet. Nick, what do you think?
If you like him enough and he's your guy at 8, you should take him at 8. 12 versus 8 is not a big difference. It's a big difference between like 1 and 4 in the draft. So if he's your guy at 8, take him at 8 unless somebody blows you away in that trade offer to come up. And also what's somebody trading up for from 12? I don't even know who's picking at 12. So I guess it's certainly possible he could be there at 12. But given how this class is shaping up, I think you're risking it at 12. So yeah, if he's from a pool of guys, you'd be interested. Let's say you love Christian Gonzalez, you love Devon Witherspoon, you're interested in Brian Brisset there. You think one of these offensive line would be a good get there. Sure. Trade back. But if he's your guy, probably got to take him there.
Good morning, Chase, coming in on YouTube. Appreciate you supporting us this morning. And Mike Woodward coming in on YouTube as well. Says, good morning, Nick and Scott. Appreciate you being here as well. And Kevin says, I don't like Richardson. It's funny. You hear the same thing about Levis. Like SEC folks down here in Atlanta, they're like, wait a minute. Richardson and Levis are being talked about in the first round. Like Levis is being talked about as like the 1 overall. And they're like, what? Doing a Little John impression. They can't believe it. So again, oh man, that's risky. And trading up for a guy like that is super risky. If I'm trading up, it's risky. It is. I would love Richardson middle first and beyond. Or if you're one of these teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, they're not going to do it, obviously, but you're really good and you got an extra pick because you fleeced somebody earlier. Then you can take a luxury pick like that. And we'll get to the Eagles here before we close. Dave Glassman coming in says, getting my Nick and Scott fix. Appreciate you, Dave. Welcome in. And here's a good question from Ryan Adonis. He says, do you think Will Levis is the next Josh Allen? Is that the comparison people are making? Let me read you his notes again from Dane Brugler's mock draft on The Athletic. Dane does outstanding work, highly recommended. But when talking about Levis, let's see, he talked about a new play caller, who got fired, Scangarello, very near and dear to the hearts of Denver Broncos. Regardless, the traits, both physical and mental, are impressive and will lead several NFL teams to believe he is QB1 in this class. So how does he interview? When they go through chalk talk sessions with him, how does he throw? He could look great. He could be that guy. And turnovers, Nick, I feel like turnovers are higher the worse team you're on because you try and do too much. You've heard me say this before. I always called Jay Cutler the dumbest smart guy I ever scouted. At first, I blamed he's at Vanderbilt and he's trying to do too much. Turns out that's just who he was. He tried to rely on that howitzer arm of his too often and force things at any level. And he never really broke that habit. But this is a good question. Can Levis run like Josh Allen? Is he just, similar size, arm strength?
I don't think he's similar size, similar athlete, similar arm strength. I mean, Josh Allen is number one in the NFL and all those things. Maybe not the most athletic. You put Lamar Jackson's speed in Josh Allen, and we're breaking the sound barrier.
It's a different type of athlete.
Yes.
If I'm running an Oklahoma drill, I'm going to take Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson. He's got 40 pounds on him.
Yeah, maybe 50.
But it's a different type of athleticism.
Yeah. So Will Levis, I think the comp that I've heard that I like a good bit is Matt Stafford in terms of the arm talent and the movement skills.
Stafford's arm is fantastic. He's one of the best I've ever seen.
It's good. It's really good. I think Josh
Okay.
Allen's even better, as far as comparing it to Josh Allen, I think is unfair. So it's a step below that, but it's really good. I also really think he's a playmaker. And again, how much are you putting weight on bowl games at this point in the NFL draft cycle, given how many players sit out? But go back and watch the oh god, what bowl was it? Whatever the bowl
Doesn't
Iowa played.
matter.
Yeah, whatever bowl it was that Iowa played Kentucky in not this past season, but the one before that, where
Mhm.
Will Levis hooked up with Wandale Robinson multiple times, and you have Will Levis out there like running around guys, running through guys, hitting amazing throws against Iowa's defense, which I think the last 2 years has allowed the fewest points per game of any defense in football. Now, part of that's because of the Big Ten West. I digress, though. But watching that one, I was like, okay, this guy's an NFL quarterback. And then when I started to hear the conversation about it this offseason, I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised at all because I just watched him do NFL play after NFL play. This season, watching him banged up, he also, I think he broke his finger on his throwing hand as well. There's a picture of him with his finger like making a 90-degree angle, which is not great. But yeah, he's I think that on the surface people like discount him, but I think a lot of it is due to the talent around him. My biggest concern again though is he's a little bit careless with the football from
Mhm.
time to time, and turnovers are a pretty not a total non-negotiable. Again, talking about Allen, here a lot of turnovers there, but you got to protect the damn football, especially in today's NFL. It's not like football
Yeah.
20 years ago where you're turning it over left and right. Teams
Yeah,
that
15 to 20 interceptions was fairly normal,
yeah,
Now
now if
that's
you're over
gonna get
10, it's like
gonna
ooh
get you benched.
yeah. So, but I think
Moving
he's a good
on to
player.
number 6, Nick, we got the Detroit Lions pick. They've got their that pick from the LA Rams. I'm sure the LA Rams weren't expecting that to be a number 6 overall when they sent that pick for Matt Stafford.
They're okay with it though, I think,
Yeah, they
in
got the
LA.
Super Bowl out of it for sure. But still, the Detroit Lions are sitting there going, we got the Rams pick and it was higher than our pick.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
But you mentioned the drop off you think there is at the position players after the big two of Jalen Carter and Will Anderson, and this is where the next position player goes off the board, and it's cornerback Christian Gonzalez. So I know you've been high on uh, with the Detroit Lions. What are your thoughts on that pick?
I really like Christian Gonzalez. I think in most draft classes, you're talking about a middle of the first round guy. I don't see the dominating, wide cornerback one, follow the wide receiver one across the field kind of guy. Yeah, he's not the most physical player, but my God, he is smooth and he's twitched up and he's got good length. Transferred from Colorado to Oregon this past year and just looked like he belonged. Obviously, you could see. I watched some Colorado football. I got the CU hat behind me, but they've been a pit of misery for a bit now before the pre-Dion days. But Gonzalez transfers to Oregon, looks damn good. Probably the best combination of size and fluidity of any of the cornerbacks in this class, and I think he's a massive juxtaposition to somebody like a Keely Ringo, who's super explosive, super yoked up, but just like his ankles or his flexibility is completely not at all. You ask him to play horizontally, can't do it. He's a very much north and south kind of guy. Doesn't have the recovery speed. So I like Christian Gonzalez a lot. Again, you're not getting Patrick Surtain here. You're not getting Sauce Gardner. You're not getting Derek Stingley. You're not getting J.C. Horn. But I think you're talking more of like a Caleb Fairley kind of guy or a Greg Newsome. Those kind of prospects coming out. Fairley's had
Which would
issues
be an
because
upgrade over what Detroit has. I mean, I think he'd
yeah.
probably be the best corner pretty much as soon as he walked on the field,
Mhm.
and then Detroit has a chance to address some other positions in the other parts of their defensive secondary and free agency maybe later in the draft. Offense looks good in Detroit. Now let's pour some resources into that defense, and I think Gonzalez would help them a lot. Speaking
They
of
do have
help,
Jeff Okuda, who's
yeah,
been up
Jeff
and down,
Okuda.
but they have talent there in Detroit. So
Yeah, he's struggled a little bit this year too, but the
yep.
defense struggled kind of on the whole. They got into some shootouts there with the Lions, and that was surprising to some people. Again, Jared Goff played himself into making a lot of money this year.
Mhm.
I had mentally already cut him and forgot he had another year on his deal. Now he's gonna play on that one more than likely. Speaking of cut, we go to the Las Vegas Raiders at 7. They've got the Raiders. Dane Brugler with the Athletic in his mock that we're going through has him taking Paris Johnson Jr. at offensive tackle. Does this help make up for the big miss they had 2 years ago? Is this fixing that mistake?
I mean, that's a sunk cost. It is what it is. He burnt that one and blew it into the wind. But Paris Johnson Jr. is my number one offensive lineman in this class. in this class with, bells on, positional versatility, played guard last season when they had we talked about it earlier. There's an offensive tackle that went to Tennessee, I think round 4, that played left tackle there last year.
Friere, it was a French name.
Friere.
Paris
Okay,
Saint.
I don't remember the
I
exact
have to
name.
look at. I did a depth chart and it was like Paris Saint Friere or something. It was a
Petit Friere. Petit Friere.
Yeah, that's what I said. It was a French name of sorts.
Yes, Petit Friere. But so he played left guard last season. Good there. Had the body build of a tackle. Kicks out to left guard and looks very good there. His hand technique still needs work. I think sometimes he can be a little bit lazy with his strikes and carries his hands a little bit low. But first year playing left tackle, and you can see the proportioned frame. And you can see the movement skill. I have, there's some people in Broncos country that do some good draft work as well. And they gave me a list of tackles like, okay, I think I like this player, Darnell Wright, over Paris Johnson Jr. And I'm like, okay, this is, back in October when we're slowly starting to get some of these guys here. And I put on the tape and it's like, I see why you like Darnell Wright with the power and whatnot and the violence that he plays with. The movement skills could not be any further. One of them moves like a first round tackle. The other one moves like a guard / tackle that you probably see go early, mid second round in a lot of classes. So Paris Johnson Jr., a little bit bummed because the guy who I would have had as my number 1 tackle went back in Olu Fashanu. I think I nailed the name at Penn State. Penn State's a team to watch for next year. I'm really interested in that squad. But I think, Paris Johnson Jr., the one thing that would give me questions about Paris Johnson Jr. is that maybe you're looking for a little bit more of the floor and even more versatility with a Peter Skoronski coming out there, who I think is the next pick coming up here. But Paris Johnson
Spoiler
Jr.,
alert.
just with the length and the movement skills and the versatility, having played guard, I think top 10, top 15 pick. Not going to compare to the tackle class that was 2 years ago where you had Andrew Thomas, Tristan Wirfs, Jedrick Wills, Mekhi Becton, who's been injured and because of that fallen off, but not that level of tackle crop this year, but not Penny Sewell, not Rashawn Slater, but a good tackle prospect.
At the Senior Bowl, I've picked out 2 guys. One I was higher on than the other in the last 2 years that I thought were sleepers that fell. And Spencer Brown, starting right tackle, Buffalo Bills, and Abraham Lucas, starting right tackle. Both started as rookies, and Spencer could win a Super Bowl this year. So I'm interested to see who becomes that guy this year. They will be there. They will show up and they will surprise people. Braxton Jones, I think, was the highest rated rookie of all offensive tackles that had enough snaps to qualify. 4th, 5th round. He was a Senior Bowl guy too. Can't wait to get to the Senior Bowl. I have to get a nickel every time I say Senior Bowl. I can donate it to Jim Nagy. And maybe I can do it now because Deanna Hendry is coming in with her super chat and supporting our show. Thank you so much, Deanna. Love you for it. Coming in orange this morning. She's coming in from Alaska. So getting in nice and early out in Alaska. She says, good morning, Nick and Deacon Scott. And this is MHH for life, Denver Broncos fan. We can, I don't know if we'll hit Denver Broncos today, but we will definitely hit Denver Broncos tomorrow for sure on some of these things. Deanna, thank you for the support. And again, just a reminder, super chats and Facebook stars are the most direct way to help keep the lights on, keep my forehead nice and shiny, and help to support the cause. And boy here, boy Bangley YT YouTube, gives us the name. Yeah, I knew it was a French one. I couldn't remember his name for sure. Thank you, sir. Let me see here real quick. Let's move on to number 8, Atlanta Falcons. Now, this was one of your picks early. We were doing the Falcons podcast. Turn a strength into a superpower. And yes, you've got needs on defense. I could go edge. I could go cornerback. I could go interior defensive line are probably bigger needs than any position on the offensive line, assuming Caleb McGarry is re-signed. But what is the identity of this team? Where could you use some help? You don't have a permanent solution at left guard. And Jake Matthews is getting a little older. So they've got Dane Brugler at The Athletic has the Falcons taking Peter Skoronski. He says, originally I had the Falcons keeping Georgia left tackle Broderick Jones in his home state. He says, but Skoronski, that some scouts think he has 5 position versatility, plug and play. So where he comes in, does he help? Chris Dahlman played well down the stretch, improved, but I want competition for him. Eli Wilkinson was really good at left guard. journeyman former right tackle. I won competition for him. You get Skoronski on there. Now I've got first round pick, Dahlman, first round pick across my offensive line. And they're all internal, not former first round pick of so-and-so who washed out. Could be an interesting pick, Nick. I know it's one that you have talked about a lot.
I mean, it's just also where the Falcons are drafting in this draft class. Like if there was a Peter Skoronski, Paris Johnson caliber edge, in my opinion, which in this one I wouldn't be. I think Miles Murphy would have a conversation. That fact that Dane has him lower is something to keep your ear to the ground for. But I think it's a smart spot for the Falcons, and you talked about it already, turning a good unit into a superpower that no matter who you line up against, we're going to probably win at the point of attack and be okay at this spot. You mentioned it with the left tackle there. You mentioned it with J.J. Dahlman. He's 1 year left of control after the season, maybe 2, but he's been up and down. Maybe Peter Skoronski's your long-term answer at center there as well. Probably one of the highest floors in the class, 5 positional versatility, as you mentioned. And
Drew Dahlman, now you got me confused. Drew Dahlman's got 2 years left.
It's Drew. Who's J.J. Dahlman?
I don't know.
Drew
Dahlman, this was his second year, first year as a starter.
Yes.
He was part of the trade with Denver that got Denver Javonte Williams.
Yeah.
The Broncos, the Falcons moved down and took Richie Grant, starting safety, and Drew Dahlman, who was a starting center. The Broncos took Javonte Williams. But he does have 2 years left again, and first year as a starter. He played well down the stretch, but I'm not going into the year thinking this is my answer just yet.
Yeah. And you're just adding a log to the fire. I think it's definitely a possibility for this team. Another point here is that the teams with the best offensive lines in the NFL that have built them over years have had almost guaranteed good offenses. We've talked about them a little bit earlier, but the Detroit Lions, Ben Johnson, going back to Detroit for another year, surprising to me, but they've been impressive. I also see that, the Eagles, a team that has, all this investment in the offensive line, they're killing it with their quarterbacks and their offenses because their offensive lines pretty much are matchup proof. So I would not be against it. Again, I think cornerback, defensive line, including edge and interior, probably more ideal for you in this spot, but you're not just manifesting a draft board and having a player that's worth that slot at that position. You got to evaluate the prospects at hand. And I think that where the Falcons are picking an offensive lineman to the spot makes some sense. And we didn't even talk about it here. Jake Matthews' contract, by the time Peter Skoronski's contract is up, you'd probably have 2 or 3 years of him potentially being a left tackle. What's happening with Caleb McGarry at right tackle? If he's a franchise tag, maybe he plays Skoronski 1 year at guard and then he kicks over to right tackle. So it's a unit that's very talented, but outside of Chris Lindstrom, a unit that could be in flux over the next 2 seasons. So adding a talent to the draft, adding a talent from the draft would not be the
it makes sense. I think there's several defensive linemen to choose from, including who the Seattle Seahawks take at number 9. So you've got Brisset, you've got Miles Murphy, you've got Tyree Wilson still on the board. Dane Brugler has the Seahawks with their trade after trading down from the 5 spot, which we didn't necessarily advocate for. Taking Tyree Wilson, edge. I know, speaking of tools, he's that behemoth, that big edge that you really like. What do you think about that pick for the Seahawks at 9? And, should that have been the Falcons pick at 8?
Certainly a possibility. I think Tyree Wilson is super strong, super lengthy, just a massive edge setter. I wish, in playing at Texas Tech in the Big 12, the team that's a conference that has not had much defensive line talent drafted early in the NFL draft. They're not going up against a lot of elite offensive linemen either. Tyree Wilson, for as athletic as he is, watching him play drove me nuts. Probably one of the last guys to react at the snap compared to his counterparts or his teammates at Texas Tech along that line of scrimmage. From an edge rusher, I don't know, but as far as the Seahawks, we saw them just get obliterated pretty much all season against the run, more so because of the interior defensive line. But if you have a dominating, play almost 2-gapping level edge rusher, that can help that unit a lot. So I would get it. Personally, I still think Miles Murphy would be higher for me because I think he's more of an athletic specimen, which I tend to gravitate to the defensive line. I think athleticism is a tad overrated for, safety, linebacker, center, interior offensive linemen, but I want height, weight, speed freaks that have the measurables along the defensive line. And I think that Miles Murphy has a little bit more than that for me. But and we got Pope. Tyree Wilson looks super slow off the line, lacks explosiveness pass I think it's something he could work on, and I'm going to be looking
that's
for.
trainable. To me, that's trainable as far as that first step burst might be the thing that you can train the most when you're talking about the measurables, and it's technique. It's again, I know some trainers personally well, some of the best in the world, and I just watch what they're able to do with some of these guys. And John, is this he's not paying attention type of thing? I mean, is his reaction time slow? Then that's a problem. But I think the first step, that how quick are you off the line? I think that's a trainable type of trait for me. So I wouldn't be overly worried about that if I liked everything else.
And we have data points coming up that'll help us, confirmation bias, or like, okay, maybe there is something here with the combine coming up, assuming that he will be healthy and go. 10-yard split in the 40-yard dash. There's now calculating that, and the 10-yard split is more valuable to me than the 40-yard dash, because now we can actually get that at a valuable a more consistent measurement. The other ones that are looking for explosiveness here, your vertical jump and your broad jump. Those are for defensive linemen, I think those might even be the most important drills that you're going to have, besides that L cone that you see. But we're going to look for some of the, we're going to be able to evaluate some of the God-given twitch that he has with those drills.
Well, and he says we don't need to train somebody. We need somebody who's ready to go right now if we pick them at 8. And for me, it's an off-season thing. This is what these guys leave school after their last football game. They leave school and they go to some place like Chip Smith Performance Systems, and right here in Buford, Norcross, and that's what they do. They're in combine training right now. They're getting ready for their pro days. So to me, that's an off-season thing. So let's see. I want to see some of those measurables. I want to see the L cone. I want to see the shuttle. I want to see the vertical jump, broad jump, explosiveness numbers. I want to see those when he gets measured in a couple of months. So for me, that's a trainable thing that if it was lacking last season, it's something you can improve from season to season. Not necessarily the size, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So, yeah. And then, in Brad's strength is a buildable speed, is not. And John agrees. The thing is Brad's actually agreeing with me. Your first step is strength. that is strength. Your first step is a power move. Watch the vertical jump and the broad jump. That's where you'll be able to find out, is his first step, is his explosion weak, or is he just getting off slow because his reaction time isn't there? Two things to watch as we're going through this process. Keep an eye on those things. Number 10, I want to finish with the Philadelphia Eagles here today, because we're right at we've already crossed over an hour. I talked about the most interesting team in the draft. And in this mock draft, Philly actually fills that gap for me, because at 10, we actually talked about at one point, would it make any sense to take Bijan Robinson in this spot? Now, the Philadelphia Eagles didn't take running back Bijan Robinson with this spot. They go corner Joey Porter Jr. Dane Brugler of The Athletic says he thinks that James Bradbury is likely to leave. But what's interesting, with the last pick, 31 overall, I think the Eagles get Bijan Robinson. Oh my God, what a luxury pick that would be. Just look out. We talk about building quarterback-proof offenses. You didn't mention the 49ers. And the system they have and the blocking schemes and they have, where the quarterbacks then become interchangeable. Now, can they win you a Super Bowl? No, but we'll see. You can win a lot of games with a powerful offensive line and a good quarterback. So we'll see. But the Eagles come out of this with Joey Porter Jr. and Bijan Robinson in the first round. A freaking plus, Nick.
Yeah. I mean, great pick for them. Joey Porter Jr. probably end up being my number 3 cornerback. The thing with evaluating these players is some of them, you try to, from where we're standing, we're trying to evaluate detached from scheme. But if you run a very press man heavy scheme, Joey Porter Jr. could be your number 1 cornerback. I would have no issue with that. But for me, not versatile enough in that. But if you're running very press man, then that's where I'm going. Right now, the Eagles do not play a lot of press man, so I don't know about the scheme fit, but it sounds like their defensive coordinator and Josh Gannon is the lead-in favorite right now for the Houston Texans job. Could be out there and heading off to, I guess, the Gulf. It's the Houston area, close to the Gulf. I don't know. I've never been to Texas, but Joey Porter Jr., obviously, former son of Joey Porter, a longtime pass rusher for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Long, great in press, very solid at the point of attack, good tackler at the edge. In today's NFL, especially if you're playing a lot of 2 high safety shells, Your cornerbacks, I'm going to pound the table this one. Your cornerbacks cannot be +1s in the run scheme. They have to be able to come down, attack the football, attack the ball carrier, take on blocks, shed blocks, and be physical players out in space. Joey Porter Jr. is that. So good player here. I think, going top 10, maybe, again, that's a little high from what I evaluated him as just in the years past, years bygone, for where a cornerback of his caliber would go. But good player, I get it, and positional value. And that's something, if we know anything about Howie Roseman, and that's another reason I think the Eagles, the running back, not sure about that. But he believes in positional value almost to a crazy level. Defensive line, wide receiver, offensive tackle, and cornerback.
And Bijan Robinson at 31 counts.
Yeah.
That counts to get him to get arguably the best offensive player in this draft at 31. And how what Dane says about this, he's like, I can't believe he's still here, but I couldn't find an obvious fit. The Eagles make sense. Yeah. A compliment to Miles Sanders with him in that offense. Good Lord. Look out. No wonder, you're having trouble. Steichen might want to stick around a year if they're able to do that. To me, that is one of the best drafts. And you got the Bears trading down, and you've got the Eagles getting Bijan in a corner at a top in the first round. To me, that is, in this mock, you got winners right there. A couple other interesting notes for me. Brisset falling to the Texans at number 12. And then the Lions, we talked about the Lions via their first round pick because they projected trade. They trade down, or they trade up to come up and get Anthony Richardson. Again, I think that's a good spot for him. 15, playing a year behind Jared Goff, see what you've got. You could end up with a Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers type of situation there if Jared Goff keeps playing great. On that note, Nick, I think we're going to get out of here. You can join us tomorrow morning at Broncos for Breakfast on Mile High Huddle on YouTube. So hope to see you then. We mentioned before, we're going to take this Wednesday show to an NFL type show, a full show where we're hitting on a bunch of different teams and the top storylines. Right now, the top storylines for us is the NFL draft. And we'll be hitting on some of that. We'll also be talking some playoffs, free agency, et cetera, et cetera. So a bunch of you coming in. We had a good numbers on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you get that alert so you can find us when we go live. Nick, any last thoughts before we get out of here?
No last thoughts. Just enjoyed. Shout out to Dane Brugler for this mock draft. He has my guy Lucas Van Ness from Iowa going 18 overall to the Green Bay Packers. I was hoping Denver would have a chance at him, but he just seems to keep climbing up draft boards. And fun mock draft overall. He also goes into round 2. So just for the Broncos fans out there, I did do the math on the offensive lineman taken because I know everybody's going to be screaming offensive line, and I get it. You really want the Broncos to add to that room, but he has the likes of, let me find the tweet here, tackles taken and the offensive lineman taken. Paris Johnson Jr. 7 overall, Peter Skoronski 8 overall, Broderick Jones 11 overall, and then he had Broncos taking Cyrus Torrance, guard from Florida, at 28. Then he had Mock. Mock is he's the front toothless, long red hair, tackle, probably moving to guard, prospect from North Dakota State, fun player. He'll be down there at the Senior Bowl, so you'll hopefully get a chance to meet with him and talk with him and see him, Scott. Going 43 to the Jets. Anton Harrison going 47 to Washington. Matthew Bergeron, guard/tackle to Pittsburgh at 49. Jalen Duncan, tackle/guard at Maryland, 54 to the Chargers. And then 59, DeWand Jones, Ohio State right tackle, who is a mountain of a man. They're saying he's going to have the longest wingspan ever measured in combine history. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but he's massive. So will be fun to see. No Darnell Wright, not the best offensive line class in my opinion, but there are some names to keep in mind here. And I'm excited to see some of these small school guys. A year ago right now, you and I were not talking Braxton Jones or Matt Walesko or guys like that. Or even Spencer Burford, who's going to be playing right guard this season. Liked him at tackle and guard coming out of UTSA. Some of these small school guys are going to elevate themselves. Christian Watson, and I'm excited for you because there's a Princeton wide receiver that is going to be at the Senior Bowl who is apparently a height, weight, speed freak. And if he's at Princeton, probably a smart cat. I'm gonna find out because I've got one of the players that plays with my son's baseball team. His older brother is a quarterback at Princeton, so I'll get some insight on route running, catching and stuff, because evidently he's a freak of an athlete.
Now let's make sure he can walk and chew gum at the same time on a football field. Will be fun to watch. So I'll get some insight on him, but we'll be here all year, folks. Appreciate you being here. Hit that subscribe button and hit the comments after the fact. I may have said some stuff that I didn't mean or need clarification. I'm always in my comments on YouTube. Facebook's a little tougher, but it's just youtube.com Scott Kennedy. Makes it real easy. Thank you, YouTube. On that note, we're going to get out of here. You can find us tomorrow on Mile High Huddle, Broncos for breakfast, and we will be back Monday morning to discuss some playoffs, draft, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We'll see you next time.
Peace.